So we're sitting here with Arto Haapala, who's professor of aesthetics in University of Helsinki. How did you become an aesthetician? What happened?
Yeah, what happened? Well, I started in theoretical philosophy. So that was my major when I started my studies here at the University of Helsinki. And also in my BA degree, theoretical philosophy was my major. But I always had an interest in the arts, especially literature. And then I started to study comparative literature and then found aesthetics, because aesthetics had become independent, so that one could take aesthetics as a major in 1980. And then in the early 80s, then I decided that I can combine my interest in literature and in philosophy by doing aesthetics. And that's what I did. And then my MA thesis was about philosophy of literature. So it was all kinds of this kind of a question of fiction. Especially it was ontology and the question of fiction. So that's I was able to combine my philosophical interest then with literature. So that's how it all started.
Yeah. And then so you focused on aesthetics immediately after that? Yes.
That's right, yeah. But I always have had an interest also in philosophical issues, in the sense that this kind of a very basic philosophical issues, like especially ontological issues, I've had an interest in them, and I will come back in some later questions to these ontological issues.
Okay. And how has the Finnish aesthetics scene developed from relatively marginalized post into the center of the debates that is now?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think obviously there have been figures who have had an influence who have, in the internalization of Finnish aesthetics, but also some institutions have been very influential in this. And I think that the International Institute of Applied Aesthetics, which was founded in 1994, has been one of the key factors. And then in 1995, the World Congress was organized in Lahti. And after that, the International Institute of Applied Aesthetics then has organized summer conferences on a regular basis. And this has certainly, I think this has been really a major factor in the Finnish scene. But obviously also, figures like Yrjö Sepänmaa he organized also a series of conferences, international conferences, not competing in any way with the Lahti Institute, but still, they were both doing good work, and the Lahti Institute is still going strong. And I think that at the University of Helsinki also I have had some great students who have an interest in becoming international, publishing in English. That was not the case when I started here. I did my own PhD at the University of London. So when I studied there for 3 years, then it was sort of a natural for me to write in English. And the emphasis was then, to become international. And I encourage my students to do this and to write their theses and to start publish in English. Yeah. Like, for example, Max did. And went abroad to study. So I think, it has grown from this. And I think I'm really happy that it has happened. And I hope it continues like this. And now it's the Finnish aesthetics scene is quite well established. It's not only environmental aesthetics. It's many other fields too.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, it's incredible with the size of a small country that it's actually so much present. So this was really interesting to hear. You talked about many different places. And Yrjö was in Joensuu, and there was the Lahti Institute.
That's right.
And the big group in Helsinki. But now when you already mentioned environmental aesthetics, How did Finland become a hub of environmental, everyday and applied aesthetics? For many of these are new topics, but for example, when I started my studies with you in 1995, these were all already around in a way or another. So the Helsinki scene, which maybe nails it better, and then these other places, Lahti, and so this whole thing is quite exceptional. What do you think?
Yeah. Even when I studied my studies at the University of Helsinki and then they took some exams, there was the possibility to read books or articles on sort of a broadly speaking environmental aesthetics.
Really?
But I mean, obviously, I mean, it wasn't an established field, so it was basically one of the first books was the collection edited by Arni Kinnunen and Yrjö Sepämaa entitled Ympäristöestetiikka, Environmental Aesthetics. And they were architects, they were philosophers, I mean sort of a very mixed group of people who first sort of, it was a series of lectures. I think it might be a Studia Generalia series of lectures. And then they put together a book, a collection of essays, and it started from there. And Kinnunen, my predecessor, he was also very open, even though he was mainly a literary scholar. I mean, that's his main contributions are definitely in that field. But he was very open to different issues in aesthetics.
Okay, so he was.
And I think, I mean, he has published some very good articles, for example, in this Ympäristöestetiikka, Environmental Aesthetics collection on the aesthetics of nature. And obviously also Sepämaa, he wrote his licentiate thesis and then also his PhD on environmental aesthetics. So those are certainly the figures. But I mean, I want to emphasize the role of the Lahti Institute because because it is an institute. It's not sort of dependent on one particular person. It's sort of it's an entity in itself.
Oh, sure. That's actually really interesting. But I was even thinking that if I remember right, there were many books in Finnish edited also, I think maybe on Asian aesthetics or antique or something
That's
like
right.
classical.
That's
and they're often published by even non-academic publishers sometimes.
Yeah.
Is it true? So they may be even sort of spread out in...
Yeah. I mean, that's. I'm glad that you mentioned that, Max. Also, a very important institute is the Finnish Society of Aesthetics, established or founded in 1972. And the first chairperson was Arni Kinnunen, and Kinnunen was very active in organizing this sort of a series of lectures, and they were many of them were by Studia Generalia lectures, and then there was one on Oriental aesthetics, and different kinds of topics were covered. So I mean, the Finnish Society for Aesthetics has been also very influential and sort of establishing the field. But that was basically in Finland. I mean, because it is sort of it's kind of a national organization. It's not that. I mean, most of the events that the Finnish Society organizes are in Finnish, as Max well knows. So not everything, but I mean by and large. So that's one of the key factors too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And coming back to your path, so you are also working on existential aesthetics. And, so can you tell us more about this direction?
Yeah. So I mean, this comes back to my interest in ontological issues. So if I would have to mention sort of influential philosophers or philosophers from whom I've taken inspiration from, I would sort of mention two, and one is a very obvious one, Martin Heidegger, and that goes back to the very early stages of my studies and my career, because after finishing my MA, I went to Germany, to Freiburg, which was the Heidegger Mecca at the time, and studied with Friedrich Wilhelm von Hermann there for a year. So that was really sort of a crucial, it was a very good possibility for me to really go deep into Heidegger's thinking, because I got a scholarship to do research there on Heidegger, and my original plan was to write my PhD on Heidegger. But then sort of my plans changed partly due to the conditions, and I had to abandon that, but I've kept an interest in Heidegger. And then the other philosopher who one might think that it doesn't have very much to do with sort of phenomenology and or sort of existential phenomenology that Heidegger represents is Joe Margolis. Well, what sort of connects Margolis and Heidegger is their interest in ontological issues. So that was Margolis. Margolis passed away like 4 years ago at the very ripe age of 96, 97, something like that. A very good friend of mine, a great colleague, and I still have like huge respect on him as a person and also for his work. And I mean, Margolis stressed throughout his career the importance of ontology, that everything starts from ontology. And I translated a very short piece by him, a very technical one, The Ontological Peculiarity of Works of Art. I translated that into Finnish, and sort of I found that very inspiring. But then, I mean, towards the end of his career, I mean, Margolis obviously started as an analytic philosopher, very analytic, sort of, and edited many influential collections. Some of the first collections of essays in the analytic tradition. Philosophy looks at the arts, for example. But towards the end of his career, he sort of was moving more towards continental tradition, I think. He took an interest, and he was widely read as that is for sure. And sort of some of his ideas, I think, came fairly close to sort of existential phenomenology too. But I mean, as a sort of the general tendency or the emphasis on ontology, I mean, that's what I found inspiring both in Margolis and in Heidegger. Yeah. But I mean, then come back to your question of like existential aesthetics. This comes back to ontology, and what I think sort of this existential or sort of existential phenomenology has given is kind of a change of the ontological question. It is not like in traditional analytic philosophy, like what is a work of art? This kind of what kind of an entity it is. The relevant question is, how are works of art? How do works of art exist? So I think this is a very important sort of a change of emphasis. And even though I'm not that keen on Heidegger's philosophy of art, but what he says about how works of art exist, or how they are, if we want to avoid the verb exist, because I mean in Heideggerian phenomenology only humans exist, is that I mean works of art are in such a way that they open up a space. So that I mean, we can then enter the space that works of art open, and then I mean, that's the way they are, rather than sort of considering whether they are sort of a type kind of entities, which can be like in several places at the same time, or whether they are unique objects. I mean, that's not like the relevant and interesting issues, because both paintings and musical pieces and cinemas, they have the same capacity to open the space. That's the way they exist. That's the way they are. And existential aesthetics, I think, I mean, it sort of starts from here, sort of like the existential foundations, and now existential in this ontological sense, the way they are. And it also, I mean, connects to the way we interact with works of art and the way in which we interact with other objects. Now I'm talking mainly about works of art, so we enter them and we are involved, or to use Berland's term, we are engaged in what's going on in the work of art. But this, to some extent, this is not only, this does not apply not only to works of art. And to be quite honest, I'm rather, myself, I'm not any longer that interested in the question of definition. These are works of art, these are something else, these are sort of popular objects, these are works of art, because they may well and they often do exist in the same way, and they have the same capacity. So whether you want to call them, popular objects or everyday objects or works of art. So who cares? So to be a bit provocative. Yeah.
That was a good big answer. There's a lot of discussion nowadays on everyday aesthetics, but how would you define everyday aesthetics?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to sort of broaden the field of everyday aesthetics and aesthetics in general, and that's how I sort of got interested in everyday objects. And I really wanted to go to the roots of the everyday, the very everydayness of the everyday. And this is also something I really took inspiration from Heidegger. That's Alltäglichkeit, the very everydayness of the everydays, and this sort of taking care, Sorge, this kind of how we are dealing this. I'm coming back to this, how they are in the world, how we are related to everyday objects. And I then sort of started to think, this might be also aesthetically interesting, that even though the way we connect, the way we relate with everyday objects is kind of self-evident, and they are often so close to us that we don't pay any attention to this. This is sort of the Heideggerian example of das Zeug, the everyday tools, that we just use them. We don't understand. Heidegger's example is very good, that we don't understand what a hammer is when if we give a description that what is it made of, and so on and so forth. We understand what a hammer is when we use the hammer and see the hammer in its context. And this is, again, I come back to the question how they exist. That is the important question. Well, everyday objects, I sort of wanted to develop the idea that this very everydayness, the reliability, has an aesthetic aspect to it. So that we can trust on them, so that they become almost like friends to us. So that they even though we don't pay any particular attention to them, but if they all of a sudden would disappear, then we would miss them. So this is I have argued that this is kind of the special pleasure that we take in the reliability and in the just the basic existence that they are around us. Like here in my office, I would be shocked if a cleaning lady or cleaning person would come and sort of take away, the order or whatever things mess I've created here, because that's the way I'm used to it. Well, coming back to everyday aesthetics, I have been misunderstood quite often in the sense that I'm not claiming that this would be this kind of a relation that we relate to everyday objects and items, that would be like everything there is when we want to talk about everyday aesthetics. Using Tom Leddy's word, I fully acknowledge, and I think it is pretty self-evident, that also the extraordinary items are aesthetically relevant in the everyday. And whether we want to call this extraordinary in the ordinary, again, Leddy's words, whether we want to say that, this is the most important thing in everyday aesthetics, well, this is, again, I don't deny the importance, but I want to just point out that, why don't we also have a look at the very everydayness itself and the aesthetic aspect of that. I've been challenged many times that, why would you call this aesthetic? Because aesthetic has traditionally been just something special and above the ordinary. Well, my question is rhetorical, why not? So we are not, these categories are not fixed once and for all, they change. And in a way, it is sort of a political matter in the sense that it sometimes makes sense to sort of extend the field, extend the semantic range of the concept. And I think that's what is especially the case in everyday aesthetics, because that is in everyday aesthetics in the sense that I'm using the word, or sort of pointing out the aesthetic relevance of the very everydayness. So it makes sense to extend it. Yeah. We are not losing then the extraordinary. Yeah. It just, we make an extension and we point out a feature that has been neglected.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to understand better your position. And finally, we also wanted to ask you a little bit your ideas about the present and the future of aesthetics as a discipline. So how do you see what kind of challenges and opportunities it has currently, and what do you see as a future for our discipline?
Well, I see. I think the future is promising, especially in the fields, sort of in the new fields. This might be just me, but some of the issues in philosophy of art, like definition. There are still, as I pointed out, there are still articles about the definition of art in the very traditional sense. I don't have myself that much interest in those questions anymore. But everyday aesthetics, certainly that's becoming more and more important, because that has to do with the very existence of us as human beings. And I also, we are all aware of the ecological issues, global warming and environmental problems, and we cannot deny those. So philosophers and aestheticians must also take a stance and sort of obviously we cannot, as humanists and as sort of in the academia, we cannot solve those problems, but we can be part of giving answers how to lead our lives. And here I see yet again great potential in everyday aesthetics. That when we start to pay attention to the our very closest surroundings. So that's kind of a very, in a way, ecological way to enjoy things aesthetically. Obviously, not everything that there is around us is aesthetically enjoyable, but still, just to enjoy the routines, and rather than going to a massive concert in London, which is those things, as we all understand, they are not ecologically very healthy. They consume huge amounts of energy, and sooner or later, I think we have to make choices how to spend our sort of what kind of aesthetic experience we want to enjoy. But here again, I think that the new technology might come to our rescue, in the sense that even now we don't have to go to New York to the Metropolitan Opera to have a live sort of a streaming. We can go to a cinemas here in Helsinki, or then from your computer. It's obviously not exactly the same, but still, you have an access, some kind of an access. And I think digitalization is actually, helping in this a lot. What has to change is our attitudes. And also, perhaps, I was last autumn, I was in at the University of Münster for 3 months with my colleague Professor Reinhard Schmücke, and he leads a project there which is exactly about the access of cultural goods through digitalization. And we had some great discussions about this, and I think it's really a interesting topic as to whether we can change our sort of attitude as to what is like authenticity and what kind of access is like good enough an access to a work of art in order to like experience the work of art. So to see, I mean, sort of a trivial example often used, I mean, to see Mona Lisa, a very like bright, excellent image through your computer, or then going to Louvre and seeing practically nothing. So I mean, where's the authenticity? I mean, you are in the same physical space, but I mean, what does it matter? So I think these are fascinating issues. And again, we come to ontology. When we come talk about the authenticity of the work of art. And when we come, I mean, how it functions, how it works, the way it exists, I mean, through a digital image, we can have the same kind of experience or better experience than like seeing in quotation marks, the real thing. Yeah. So I think I see a great future for aesthetics.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. That's a really great closing point.
It was a great closing, and we are happy and thankful for the interview. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you very much for this. Joltan and Max. It's great.